few reflections for our adoration time together. And the Gospel of Matthew, which is the Gospel of today, and the Feast of St. Andrew, which is my confirmation name also, is, I think, special to the church, but it's also very special to us as priests and ministers who have given their lives to Christ and his church. So I think the first reflection I'll offer to you, and I'm going to do a little bit of sharing through this so that you get an idea of what I'm talking about. First reflection I would say is, when was the first time the Lord began to work in your life or speak to you? And I can track it back to about 9 or 10 years old. And it was about that point when I had made my first communion. And of course, my parents had taught me how to pray. And I began to see what the priest was doing and wanted to emulate that in many ways. Now, there's a humorous part to this in that, of course, in those days, we had to learn Latin. And my brother Kenny and I were taking Latin together. We took the test. He passed, and I did not. And my parents, though, waited for me to pass the test. Now, God's sense of humor, having been in the seminary all the time I ended up taking 6 years of Latin, so God has a sense of humor. In any event, that first call that the Lord had for each of us, it may not have been something that was profound, but it could be. Just simply the Lord drawing us in. The Lord drawing us in. The first time that happened for each of us. And then the call to enter the seminary for us. And what was taking place in our faith life, what was taking place, of course, in our desire to serve, what was taking place in terms of who we are as God's people. And I was 14 when I came into the seminary, so I'm a lifer, and did not really have a clear picture of what priesthood meant, did not have a clear picture of what, even seminary was about, church, any of that. And that's probably true for most of us, that as we entered the seminary, we had ideas of what it could be like, we had ideas of what it might be like, but what was it like for us? And when we became a part of that faith community, those brothers who were studying to be priests. And then the third reflection is, as we began to go through the seminary and our studies, and for me it was through high school and feeling drawn then to go to college, seminary, and then feeling drawn to go to graduate school, seminary. So what was it like for you? And who was the Lord for you in those moments? Who was the Lord calling you to be in those moments? And even what were some of the questions that you had as you either went into college seminary or novitiate, or whether you were going into graduate school seminary, theology. And then the next one is really about our call to being transitional deacons and making the promises we did of celibacy and also having Jesus at the center of our lives for the rest of our lives. And that really became a real invitation for me, but also there were questions around it. And I wasn't sure that I was even close to being worthy of being ordained a priest. And that actually went through a good part of my diaconate. And as I slowly but surely came to love the people, and slowly but surely came to love the church through that kind of ministry, that began to change my call, actually. And so, what was it like for you when you were ordained transitional deacons? What was it like for you? And what was the Lord doing in your life at that time? I've shared with you before that on my priesthood retreat, I went into the retreat really even then not sure I was even close to being worthy of being ordained a priest. And after about 3 or 4 days of prayer, finally the answer came, and I've shared with you this before, that the Lord Jesus spoke to me just quietly, but he said, even if you are ill, even if you're feeling terrible and you're celebrating Mass, I will be there. That changed everything for me. And I've shared that with you before. And so the same question, I think, is for us. That time of our ordination, both the ordination day, of course, but as we prepared for it, what were the questions that were really coming into our hearts and minds and souls especially? And what were we committing ourselves to? That's the other side of this. Because in the first 5 years of priesthood, I think all of us who have been 5 years or more can say what we thought we were saying yes to wasn't necessarily what God was asking us to say yes to. And that also is part of the meditation for us. What is God saying to us? Especially if there's been some disappointment or hurt, or even moments when we didn't really agree with the bishop who was the bishop then. And I had a few of those moments too. And so those are really all part of our meditation, I think, today, regarding Jesus saying to us, follow me, follow me. And as he calls each of us by name. And of course, for those of us that have had years of priesthood, and I'm now at 45, I was in the presence of Father Monsignor Joe Mercier the other day, and I'm still a baby compared to him in terms of years of service. And his memory of service is really amazing. And the smile that comes on his face is an inspiration to me that after all those years of priesthood, he's still smiling, that the Lord called him to be a priest, and the Lord loves him that much. And that's really the question for us. No matter how many years we've been serving, is the smile still on our face? Do we still have the joy of the Lord, that initial call that God gave each of us? Do we still have that spirit in us, no matter what's happened? And if we need healing, let's bring it to the Lord Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament this morning. And if we need peace, let's bring it to the Lord Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament this morning. And if we're even questioning our vocation, let's bring it to the Lord Jesus. Let him speak to us as he is there for us very personally, saying to us, I love you, and I call you to be my priest. I call you to walk side by side with me, with my people, and to love them into being my disciples. That's us. That's what he calls us to be. I will be also praying for each of you individually during this time. Ask your prayers too, that I too may continue to hear that call that Jesus gives us, and that the love of Christ may also surround me, fill me, that I may share that love with you and with our people. Let's pray for that grace.